3:05 a.m. A single Ukrainian MiG-29, slipping through Russia's most advanced air defense grid. Target, a $1 billion power facility at Moscow's edge. What happened next forced Putin to rethink everything about security. This is the Ghost jet mission. This wasn't just a raid. This was a strategic shockwave delivered by an aging Soviet airframe, modified into a stealth Ghost, outsmarting S-400s, evading Krasukha jammers, dodging interceptors. One pilot, one jet, one impossible mission. Today I'm breaking down every detail of this operation, the modifications that made it possible, the tactics that made it deadly, and why this single strike changed the entire calculus of the war. Let's dive in. Meet Captain Viper, a pilot who survived 2 R-77 missile engagements simultaneously, an experience that made him legendary inside Ukraine's aviation community. Tonight, he's preparing for something even more dangerous. Murted Road Air Base, 3:05 a.m. The freezing tarmac vibrates under blue afterburner glow, 37,000 pounds of thrust. His MiG-29 is ready. But this isn't a standard Soviet fighter anymore. Ukrainian engineers transformed it into something unprecedented. The target, Kashira Thermal Power Plant, 75 miles from Moscow, a facility providing 10% of the capital's electricity, generating $2 billion annually in gas-driven revenue, supporting industrial output, residential grids, command infrastructure. Reaching it requires crossing the S-400 defensive envelope, systems designed to intercept targets flying faster and higher. This mission is Ukraine's operational reply to a proposed peace framework, a 28-point plan requiring Ukraine to surrender Crimea, give up 4 eastern provinces, accept a frozen conflict. Kiev rejected it firmly. Captain Viper's mission is the military demonstration, proof that Ukraine can strike deep, strike precisely, strike anywhere. Viper's MiG-29 looks Soviet, but the systems are completely different. Ukrainian engineers integrated Western technology, an ALQ-31 electronic countermeasures pod beneath the fuselage. This modification reduces radar signature dramatically, enables deception protocols reserved for advanced platforms. The pod generates frequency hopping countermeasures, hopping more than 1,000 times per second. Broadcasting Doppler returns that mimic biological flight patterns. To radar operators, the MiG resembles migrating birds. Not a jet crossing at 600 miles per hour, but flying low creates problems. Air density forces engines to work harder. Exhaust temperature rises to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The MiG becomes a conspicuous infrared signature, even if radar visibility is diminished. The solution? Terrain masking combined with electronic warfare, using hill lines and forests to absorb radar reflections. Flying through pockets of degraded sensor coverage. The route is calculated precisely. Crossing the Bryansk region, dense pine forests, rolling hills, thick humidity around 85%. Water vapor scatters radar waves, creates additional interference. Every environmental factor becomes a tactical advantage. The MiG also carries Wild Hornet mini drones, preloaded with biomimicry jamming. These drones emit electromagnetic patterns mimicking geese wing beats, creating false targets, overwhelming threat prioritization algorithms. 3:20 a.m. The MiG crosses into Russian airspace, descending to 200 feet above ground level, lower than the Statue of Liberty's crown. This altitude blends the aircraft into ground clutter. The Nebo-M long-range radar sweeps the airspace. Theoretical detection capability, 360 nautical miles. The MiG should appear immediately, but Viper uses terrain masking across Bryansk's hill lines. His course changes continuously, using uneven ground to absorb radar reflections. For several minutes, the aircraft moves through sensor blind spots. Then, the concealment breaks. 3:28 a.m. The S-400's Gravestone radar achieves intermittent track, stationed near Elektrostal, 40 miles from target. The radar can monitor hundreds of objects across long distances. Operators initiate warm-up for a 40 N-6E missile. Long-range interceptor, travels over 10,000 miles per hour. The high-energy scan latches onto the MiG. The aircraft vibrates from electromagnetic load. Radar crew increases power output to defeat jamming. But Viper dives toward Lake Kashira, flying at 60 feet, using the lake's rippling surface, scattering radar reflections further. The S-400 is optimized for high-altitude targets. At extremely low elevations, line of sight weakens. For a moment, the MiG vanishes into clutter. 3:32 a.m. The situation becomes more complex. Viper deploys 2 Wild Hornet mini-drones, emitting biomimicry jamming patterns. Simultaneously, onboard AI analyzes S-400 scan rates, identifying a cyclical blind spot, 1.9 seconds in each 8-second rotation. By synchronizing movement with those gaps, Viper navigates through. Russian operators see what appears to be biological targets. They interpret it as false alarm, pause their response. 20 miles north, decoy drones initiate explosive charges. Shock waves disrupt local airflow. The MiG loses several degrees of pitch stability. Crosswinds exceeding 50 knots buffet the fuselage. Russia's Krasukha 4 electronic warfare system engages, broadcasting broadband jamming across 200 nautical miles. The MiG's GPS navigation fails instantly. Viper transitions to hybrid inertial navigation, fiber optic gyroscope tracking movement through internal measurement, not satellite feedback, maintaining course using preloaded terrain profiles. The Russian battery escalates. The Gravestone radar achieves hard lock. A 48N6 interceptor launches, traveling at Mach 6, covering roughly 1 mile per second. Viper activates the swarm illusion protocol. 4 remaining Wild Hornet drones deploy, each broadcasting synchronized radar reflections. The S-400's display populates with more than a dozen artificial targets. Threat prioritization algorithms prompt manual confirmation. Contradictory returns flood the screens. Russian personnel hesitate, attempting to classify the sudden swarm. That hesitation gives the MiG the moment it needs. A nearby Panzer S-1 battery detects movement visually, engages with tracer rounds streaking across the sky. A 57E6 missile detonates near the MiG's right wing, damaging 2 feet of composite material. The cabin fills with scorched resin smell. Despite turbulence, Viper stabilizes the jet. Activates final countermeasure. A pod releases thermobaric decoy over Lake Kashira, producing a fireball large enough to resemble an in-air explosion. Observers on ground interpret it as kill confirmation. Momentarily, cease fire. 3:38 a.m. Viper aligns the aircraft with target. The Flyer pod displays glowing outline of Kashira turbine hull. The turbine operates at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, spinning at 3,600 RPM, producing a distinct thermal signature. At several miles distance, Viper releases modified AGM-88H ARM missile, carrying thermobaric charge instead of standard anti-radiation warhead. The missile accelerates to near Mach 2, closing distance rapidly. On impact, the warhead penetrates deep into reinforced concrete. Before detonation, internal overpressure exceeds 5,000 psi. The turbine's 80-ton rotor destabilizes, disintegrates catastrophically. Steel fragments destroy auxiliary boilers. Escaping fuel ignites immediately. A fireball rises nearly 1,000 feet. Localized power grids drop offline instantly. The cumulative destruction results in infrastructure losses exceeding $1 billion. Combining plant damage with secondary grid impacts, the MiG's remaining fuel is insufficient for return flight. Less than 8 minutes of airtime left. Viper heads west toward Bryansk. Russian Su-35s scramble from several airfields, but low-level terrain masking hinders interception attempts, reaching an abandoned agricultural strip. Viper lands on ice-covered surface. Partisans from Freedom of Russia Legion await extraction. The MiG's landing gear fails under strain, blowing a tire, but the aircraft stops short of tree line. Viper evacuates, enters civilian vehicle. Extraction team departs before Russian patrols arrive. By sunrise, Russian authorities assess consequences. Kashira facility requires long-term reconstruction, approximately 500 megawatts of generating capacity offline. Energy-derived revenue losses approach $5 million per day. To reinforce remaining grid sections, 3 Pantsir batteries reassigned, from active fronts including Donbass, altering operational balance significantly. These redeployments reduce short-range air defense density on selected fronts. The strategic effect is immediate. Ukraine demonstrated deep strike precision, without relying on 5th-generation aircraft, adapting older platforms with advanced electronic warfare and deception tools. Moscow faces difficult questions. If a single modified MiG-29 can penetrate their defenses, what else can Ukraine accomplish? The psychological impact is profound. Moscow is no longer untouchable, critical infrastructure within striking distance. The proposed peace framework suddenly looks different. Ukraine isn't negotiating from weakness, they're negotiating from demonstrated capability. The operation proves several critical points. First, electronic warfare can overcome technological disadvantages. Second, terrain masking and environmental factors matter more than raw power. Third, asymmetric tactics can achieve strategic objectives. Fourth, Ukraine can strike anywhere, anytime. The question moving forward is clear. If Russia responds with advanced aircraft or long-range missiles, how will Ukraine continue leveraging cost-effective countermeasures? While sustaining momentum gained from tonight's $1 billion strategic blow, this mission sent multiple messages simultaneously. To Putin, your capital isn't safe, your infrastructure is vulnerable. To Russian military, your air defense has fatal weaknesses. To Ukrainian forces, deep strike capability is real and proven. To Western allies, Ukraine can execute sophisticated operations independently. To the world, this war isn't frozen. Ukraine maintains offensive capability. The $1 billion price tag isn't just infrastructure damage. It's the cost of Russia's false sense of security, the cost of believing Moscow was untouchable, the cost of underestimating Ukrainian ingenuity. Captain Viper's mission proved that determination and intelligence can overcome superior numbers and technology, that a single pilot in a modified Soviet jet can achieve what entire squadrons couldn't, that Ukraine fights not with overwhelming power, but with overwhelming purpose. This operation redefined what's possible in modern warfare. Ukraine proved that aging platforms can defeat advanced defenses, that electronic warfare and tactical brilliance trump raw technology, that Moscow's air defense grid has exploitable weaknesses. The lessons are clear. Asymmetric thinking defeats symmetric power. Environmental factors are force multipliers. Deception is as valuable as firepower. And in modern warfare, the smartest force wins. Not the strongest, not the best equipped, the smartest. Ukraine just proved it at Moscow's doorstep.